Good evening. Welcome to the January 24th Newmarket Planning Board meeting. Would you please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. A little bit of housekeeping. Both Janice and Ezra will not, neither one of them will be here tonight, so Peter and Glenn, you both are sitting in. Second is public comments. Are there any public comments on anything that's not on the agenda? Hearing none, I'll close the public comment section. Next on the agenda is review and approval of the December 13, 2016 minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Did I hear Glenn?
You heard Glenn.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's made and second. Any discussion, comments?
I had that one we were discussing beforehand, that
Okay.
the second waiver, which has already been.
Page 3, that needs to be a waiver, yeah.
All right.
Anything else? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. On to regular business.
We have workshop minutes.
Oh, you want to?
On the agenda, but you want to do them?
You want to do them? I don't care. Has everybody had a chance to review them? All right, is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve the Newmarket Planning Board workshop meeting minutes of January 10th, 2017.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments, corrections?
Just one correction on page 8, line 42. That should read she.
Page 8. Come on now.
Page 8, line what? 42.
42.
Yeah, that's, it should be she.
Oh, yeah.
It's Roseanne.
Actually, was that Rosie who said that? I think
That was Roseanne.
Roseanne? Okay. I thought it was Ed
Yeah.
Burke, but
No,
No,
that
okay.
was about the
Forgive me?
size of, nope, that's fine. Any other
Rosie's
comments,
agreed,
corrections? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All
Aye.
those opposed? The ayes have it. Great, thank you. On to regular business. First, I will read this. There will be a public hearing to amend Chapter 32 zoning, Appendix A subdivisions and Appendix B site plans of the municipal code of the town of Newmarket, New Hampshire, in accordance with RSA 675:2, RSA 675:6, and RSA 675:7. The purpose of these amendments are to, 1, make modifications to permitted uses in the M2 and the B3 zones to promote economic development. 2, clarify language pertaining to the continuation of non-conforming uses. 3, modify provisions pertaining to accessory apartments to comply with Senate Bill 146, New Hampshire's new accessory dwelling unit law, which is found in RSA 674:71 through RSA 674:73. And 4, modify application submission requirement for subdivisions and site plan by changing the application deadline from 15 to 21 days prior to the planning board meeting at which the application will be considered for acceptance. Alrighty, so with that, I will open the public hearing. Is there anybody in the public, before we really get going on this, that has any comments on any of the particular provisions? Go ahead, Diane.
I just want to mention that there's a set of the changes on the back table, and there's a one-page update that I prepared that you may want to have as well if you haven't picked that up off the back page. Thank you. It pertains to accessory dwellings. It does not pertain to the rezoning proposal for permitted uses.
Do we need that up here, Diane? Do we have that in what
You
you
already
gave us?
have that.
Okay. One section at a time?
Yes.
Unless they want to talk, the public wants to talk to specifics.
Yeah, this gentleman wanted, did you want to speak, sir? Not at this point?
I have questions that I kind of quickly, you were talking to me?
Yes. If you want to speak, please come up here and give your name.
Oh, okay. My name is Gerald Martin. Just quickly,
Address, please?
Address?
212 South Main Street.
Did you say Jerry Martin? I'm sorry.
I go by Gerald.
Gerald, okay, Gerald,
Yeah.
thank you.
I'm just curious. One thing I came with and one thing I just kind of saw in your description just here on this packet. Front page, it refers to oh, maybe it was on the, maybe this is the one I got mailed to me. On the one that got mailed, it doesn't refer to changes in the first paragraph to the change to M3, which happens to be where I live, which
You did receive a copy of that.
I did. And that's what I'm looking at now.
We didn't send out all the copies to all the people with all the changes, just the section pertaining to the neighborhood.
But that's what he's saying.
That's saying-
Right, it's 30.
Yeah, I'm talking about M3 right now.
Okay, so you're all set. You have the-
So, the purpose of the amendments are to make modifications to permitted use in M2 and B3.
That's right.
Modifications to M3 is not referenced in that paragraph,
Yeah,
but it is
It's in the second.
later. Oh, on the zoning and that can make, okay.
You have
Thank you.
January 24th. Okay, it's the second paragraph, talking about B3.
Okay. So then my question has to do with just a general one in terms of the item research and development being added to M3 and removed from B2, is it?
Opposite.
Opposite.
M2B3.
M2B3.
In paragraph 1, revise the table of permitted uses for the M2 district in section 202 of the zoning ordinance. B, and for the M3 district, you're in M3, in section 208. So that the proposal is to add research and development permitted use by right within those districts. It currently is not.
To add research and development
Correct.
to M3. M2 and M3.
Correct.
Okay, add research and development. So that's my question, is why add it there, but then it's removed from B3.
Yes, the Economic Development Committee was recommended that we remove it from the R&D from B3, primarily because of the aquifer protection area that is at B3.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Because of the
Because the
which?
aquifer protection area that overlays the B3 district.
And one more time on the modifying word there, protection what? What kind of protection?
Aquifer, our wells.
Aquifer, okay,
Aquifer
okay,
protection
aquifer.
district.
Okay,
So
That was the only
that
question I
use
had.
wouldn't be by right. They would, someone may, if they want to, in
Right.
that district, do an R&D facility, it would be through
you have to be
variance.
reviewed. Yeah, sure, okay. I was just curious.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Oh, come on up, sir, please.
Thank you. David Melanson, 32 Riverbend Road. I also own this property out at 454 on Wadley's Fall, B3. I just wasn't sure of the reasoning of where the town was headed with rezoning it and what the intention of rezoning it. Rezoning, spot rezoning.
It's not a rezoning. We're changing the table of permitted uses within that zone.
Right, so we,
Zoning will stay the same. The zoning district will be the same. We're just modifying the uses within the district.
so it's going, so it's, yeah, you're changing the uses, which we purchased that property with intentions of warehousing or, we came to a conceptual hearing after when we bought the property, and when the economy slowed down, we decided not to build and wait on it. But the uses that you're changing, it's like, the new uses are kind of like, not what our intention for the property was, so I was just curious, it's not a big parcel of property out there on the north side of Route 152 before the town line. There's like 4 lots, and that would affect us, and I wasn't sure, kind of seemed like spot rezoning, and I just didn't know what the intention was from the town. I don't know much about this, so I just wanted to come to the meeting and find out what I could, so I knew where I stood with the property.
When you said you had intended to do warehouse, was it warehouse or was it like storage units?
It was good, no, it was gonna be actually a shop and for warehousing trucks and an office, and the B3 zoning, also allowed for secondary structures, so we were gonna maybe possibly build a house on top of the hill there. And we had the plans all done up for that and stuff, and we own a trucking company. We haul gasoline tankers, and I'm grandfathered on Riverbend Road, but who wants 10 tractor trailers on Riverbend Road, right? So that was our intention originally, but when the economy slowed down, we didn't really need to. And I store them trailers now in Epping on a rented lot. And our intentions was eventually to do that, but I'm just curious if that's gonna affect that.
And how many acres do you have there?
It's just only 3 acres.
3 acres, okay. Okay.
Just to be clear, the current zoning does not allow residential use in the
Well,
B3.
it does allow it on B3 zoning. We went through that with the code enforcer, that for secondary structure on the B3.
That's not correct.
Yeah, there's a house,
That's grandfathered. You'd require a variance to do any residential on that lot that's not developed.
we were told by the zoning guy that there was a thing in there that for a secondary structure on a B3 lot. So if we, in other words, if we put up a garage,
Auxiliary.
that we could,
Auxiliary use.
yeah, so, correct.
Yeah.
But it would still have to be permitted
Yeah.
within the zone. If it's
Yeah.
not a permitted use within the zone, it doesn't matter if
Yeah.
it's primary or secondary, it's any use.
Well, that's,
You might want to revisit the zoning
Yeah.
officer on that.
How long ago did you have that
That's not- how
discussion
long
with the
ago was
zoning
it?
officer?
we bought the property, what, '07?
Oh,
Vincent.
Yes.
that's 10 years ago.
Yes, it was, 8, 9 years ago, 10 years ago.
So to also answer one of your original questions, and I don't think, Diane, you hit on this, the future intention for this B3 district is to create an overlay zone for a continuing care retirement community. Was the recommendation of the Economic Development Committee, and that's what the planning board will be moving towards,
An overlay zone for,
for a continuing care retirement community.
so one of the properties around me is gonna build a retirement community, is that what you?
It would be allowed anywhere in the B3.
Oh, it would be
If-
allowed.
Yeah, as long as they would
No.
meet the requirements
By a
for that
special
development.
use permit.
So the land that I own, I would be limited to the 5 new things listed as educational facility, office complex, retail, health club, or fraternal organization?
That's it going to be in addition to what is,
I have the table of permitted uses here.
Okay.
You can look at this, there are other uses that are not listed here on this.
Oh, okay, that was my biggest concern. I saw the 5 changes, and I was like, because I'm really probably not gonna build a health club out there.
Diane, I think it'd be good for the public, well, I think it'd be good to
Yes,
read them.
I would love to.
I think it'd be good to read them in for what,
Yeah, for people at home.
to read them in for people at home.
Look at it
Yeah.
too after this one.
Okay.
Okay, so, the table of permitted uses, which is part of the zoning ordinance, and we're talking about the B3 district, and right now, hotels are allowed, conference centers, indoor-outdoor recreation facilities, health clubs, retail uses, wholesale, warehousing, light manufacturing, research development, educational facilities, fraternal organizations, what we call flexible use developments, which is permitted by conditional use permit, and an office complex is permitted. So if the uses that I just read are not listed here, then they will remain. Okay?
Okay.
Do you want to borrow this? I can run and make some copies if that would be helpful.
it back to them.
Okay.
Skip, did you have something you want to say? Please come up.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Skip Manso, 33 Kimball Way. I was going to ask what were the other uses, and you just read those for us, so I appreciate that. However, where does the continuing care use appear?
It's not here yet.
Not here yet.
Correct.
Stay tuned. We're working on it.
What's wrong?
Nothing.
Why can't, it hasn't been, the use
Working
hasn't
on
been
it.
defined?
We are working on it.
Okay, so we're going to have another one of these meetings.
We're going to
Oh,
have
yeah.
another meeting. It's not out of committee yet. We have a subcommittee that's been working on the language and fine tuning it. And you will be notified as a butter and affected party.
All right. Well, I have the floor, if I could.
Sure.
My daughter, Jennifer Russell, and her husband Nate asked me to speak for them. They said, if the town doesn't want to buy their property, they'd be happy to have it rezoned as residential. That's their comment. Thank you.
No,
They have
it's grandfathered.
Grandfather did.
Okay.
Excuse me, that was the zone. You have
to have
the zone
For residential.
for residential.
Okay, because I just commented, there's already a house on that
That-
lot,
that's-
and it's
that's
already
correct.
residential.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Right,
yeah.
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That is the recommendation of the EDC, is that the B3, once it's developed with a CCRC, would be moved towards residential.
Can I speak again?
Absolutely, come on up.
Just a comment for a little history. I have 19 acres of land there and in this zone, and have owned it since 1993. And when I purchased this property, it was residentially zoned. Shortly thereafter, the town fathers, can't remember if it was a council or selectmen then, however, convinced us that going to B3 would be a great thing to do. And they would bring water and sewer to the property, to the zone, all the properties in the zone, right up Route 152. Needless to say, we've never seen water and sewer, or even any attempt made at it. But as soon as the B3 zone was approved, our taxes were doubled, exactly 100% more in our taxes. And there we sit. I'm the only person who submitted and had a site plan approved, a substantial site plan approved in that zone. I spent $75,000 on engineering, and I had a site plan approved for a series of offices and warehouses, combinations so that contractors and the alike could have a place to operate from. However, as we know, our economy is a moving target all the time. And by the time we were able to do enough site work on the site to get the sites prepared for buildings, the economy was gone and has remained down for that type of use for a long time. Also, I subdivided the property into two different lots, a 5-acre lot and a 12-acre lot, which has now become a 14-acre lot. And I tried to sell that 5-acre lot as a B3 lot for 5 years. Every realtor in the Seacoast knew that lot was for sale, and it was for sale substantially under what the town was taxing me for. I had exactly one showing on that property in 5 years in the B3 zone. I call it a failed zone. I hope that your hard work will bring that around. Thank you.
Thank you, Skip.
Question?
This gentleman.
I could just, yeah,
Come on up again, please.
this would just finish me up, so I
Sure.
don't want to waste more of your time. I'd like to give this back to you.
Oh, okay. Does anyone else want to look at it?
So I just heard you say that the B3 geared towards maybe residential, is that what you, did I hear you say that? Eventually?
The Economic Development Committee, who was working on evaluating all of the current business zones in town, or mixed-use zones, their conclusion came to that the B3, as Skip pointed out, was just not a successful rezoning of that area.
Okay.
And so the recommendation was to develop these continuing care retirement community, because there's a need for that, as an overlay within that area. The specific location, meets what they believe to be the criteria that those kind of businesses would be looking to create. There's ample land there. Water and sewer, the developer would have to bring that out. It may be in conjunction with the town, I don't know that, but that would be required. And then, again, because there's been no development as far as any commercial development of that zone, and it was redone at least in 1993, is that what I'm hearing, Skip? So we don't want to have land that's not, that renders the property owner having useless land. And so the recommendation would be is once the CCRC was developed, that then you would reevaluate that zone and allow for residential use, which would seem to be the highest and best use, particularly if water and sewer is brought to
Okay,
that.
so,
There's no promises, that's
There's
just
no
the
promises,
recommendation
but-
of the committee.
but that's a small lot, and if that did happen and somebody developed that, it would be probably a good direction to head to build a home up there. Everybody's nodding yes.
You're on top of the hill right across from Ash Swamp Road?
Yes.
In that area? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's a big, because we'd like to build a retirement home there, live there, our last home. And I would have thought, well, I don't know if they're gonna let us do that, but if that's the direction that it may go, then I'm pretty happy.
That's the committee's recommendation.
Okay, cool, thank you.
You know, we
Thank you very
understand
much.
that there are landowners there that have not been able to really have an economic use of their land because of the
Right,
zoning.
yeah, yes, okay, thank you.
Anybody else from the public? Rosie?
I just had a question for the chair, and maybe when we do have further meetings regarding this, I think for the committee itself, it would be helpful if we had someone like Skip Manso in to explain to us the advantages and disadvantages of the property, how it's laid out, access and so forth, when we go forward, if they could keep an eye on the postings and maybe attend some of the meetings, and we'd appreciate some of their input.
I agree, I think that would be great. The more input, the better.
Yep. And it wasn't, I was on planning board when Mr. Manso's project was approved.
Does anybody else have anything? Oh, Skip, come on up, please. Yeah, we gotta just make sure we get you on
I just
the,
wanted to say that I'd be happy to try and be helpful when those, and Diane can let me know when those meetings are coming up, try to make those.
If we have actually postings for public hearing, all the property owners that were
Will
notified
get
by mail
notified.
will be notified again.
Mhm.
It won't be by certified mail, it'll be by regular mail, so we'll be looking for that notice.
Mhm.
And we do appreciate your input. And Mr. Page, Mr. and Mrs. Page, do you have anything you'd like to add to the discussion? I know we've had several conversations over the years about the development of this area, and I'd like to just wanted to mention that we'd like to hear your input as well,
Well,
if you feel like you would like to share that.
most of the things Skip said, I've come in and talked to you about before, that I kind of wondered how they come about zoning it that way in the beginning. Now I know where it started from back in the 90s or whatever, but I guess my biggest question is where there's so many different properties out there together, and I can see, in Skip's case, and, he's willing to do something with his property. It's pretty well done as a gravel pit, but there's other existing gravel pits that are still operating, in the middle, pretty much in the middle. It kind of reminds me of Chicago, There's some rundown parts and some good parts, and how you would, it doesn't look good to a developer that you don't own, one person doesn't own it all. So you got a big area that's in one zone, but nothing can happen. I can see that, nobody's gonna run water and sewer all the way out there unless they own a good chunk of it. So, the zoning, uses of it, unless everyone's at the same point where they're willing to sell or be in the market to sell, it just seems like it's still a ways down the road. The demand for it. I guess another concern is where most of those gravel pits have been taken down well below, even though it's an aquifer. On one hand, they're concerned about the aquifer and they're trying to protect the aquifer, but right in the center of the aquifer, like right in here, is a big hard hump of ledge that's not restricted, And, you know, that's coming out, and even if it comes down to a level, the level's far beyond, you know, the roads. And the biggest concern is if someone doesn't own it all, how would they ever develop any part of it and have adequate drainage? I don't
That's certainly a
think it's
challenge.
I think that the
So,
hope is that somebody
does-
would buy up all the parcels and consolidate them and
Well,
do one larger scale development.
As he
to
said,
make the
he's been trying to
economies work.
sell it and market it for 20 years, and maybe another 20. You know, it seems like maybe the housing thing is the more, you know, more desirable than manufacturing or anything else. It seems like you could take a small spot like the Bullion property, or even a pit and do housing, and that seems like the only thing that would have a market right now.
I personally tend to agree with you on that. But we have a long way to go to get to there. There's a lot of work needs to be done. Go ahead.
A question, if this is approved and the zone is changed, Mr. Manso said that his taxes doubled when it went to B3. If it gets changed, will their taxes be lowered?
That's an assessment issue.
That's something
It
to
would
ask
be the assessed
Jerry in the
value.
assessment office. And I think if it's passed before April 1st, that they would be, if they do change it, that they would be taxed on the change and not on the B3. That's something that they might want to look into. And it was Leo Fillion who championed the change of that area to B3.
He did.
He did. Oh, yes, he did.
Yeah, I remember it well.
Yeah.
And I need to correct something. I own the property since '93, but I think the B3 zone came about in 2000, either 2000 or 2001, because I brought my, I think it was 2000, because I brought my site plan before the planning board in early 2003, and it took almost a year to put it together. And it was approved, I think, in December of 2003. So, and we were all aware what was going on in 2006, going into 2007, so. But before Roseanne brought up the business about taxes, you know, it's been a long time. This is 2017. So if we can settle in on 2000 as the year the B3 zone came in, I should have looked it up before I came, but it's been 17 years with my taxes being doubled. And, you know, I've been hoping and waiting, and I reached in my pocket and spent a bunch of money and try to move it along, but it was not to be. And however, you know, trying to rezone something into a zone that primarily is hopeful that a developer will come along and be successful in negotiating with the old Bullion property and Wayne Rose's property and my property and Leo Fillion's property and Newmarket Sand and Gravel and Bob and his wife and the other folks that are on the periphery. That's a big wish and hope. But in the meantime, the tax bills keep coming every year. And they're twice of what they used to be. And if this thing was rezoned to residential, they ought to go back to residential taxes, which is 50 cents on the dollar from what we're all paying right now. And we don't have any ability to really do anything with it. So, you know, those are real dollars that affect each and every one of us property owners. And, you know, I have a grandfathered gravel pit there that I operate, and so, which I pay taxes on the material that come out of there also, as well as paying taxes on my property. I've done my best not to complain, but, you know, if we're gonna get ourselves into a situation that puts us into a long-term situation, then it's time to complain about the taxes, you know. And I have to say that I have gone for an abatement, and I was successful in getting a small abatement on a part of the property. And I'll just say for the record that when I did my site plan approval, I asked for a residential accessory building on the 5-acre lot, which has frontage on Ashwamp Road and an entrance on Ashwamp Road. And I was denied that. And that was the second time that I was denied by the planning board for a residential use. And that particular piece of property is on the periphery of this zone. There's homes all along Ashwamp Road. They go all out on 152, and they continue down 152. They continue down around behind us on the other side of Norton Lane. And so I think some consideration should be given to the periphery of this property. And
Make it residential.
right.
That's always was my.
If you have frontage on those residential streets, which is really what they are, you know, even though one of them's Route 152, there's an awful lot of homes on Route 152, you know. So I just think maybe that's something to consider in the overall scheme and your work that you're doing on this.
Just to clarify, Skip, it would have been the zoning board that denied you?
No, it was the planning board.
Said the planning board for.
I presented it as part of my site plan, and they disallowed it.
You could have appealed that to the zoning board and perhaps got.
I could have.
Yeah, the planning
It could
board
have.
couldn't have allowed it.
Right, planning board doesn't have that authority.
So, yeah, I still could. We all have that right,
Yep.
and we still could. So I just offer that up for, you know, some of the history of what's going on here in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Skip. Go ahead.
You know, Diane, too, especially like you said, that was one of your ideas to do in that area, especially if it's apparent that those homes, those parcels, could just go to ZBA and get the approval under the 5 criteria. Why make them go through that? You know, just,
Well, that stretch of roadway is clearly residential.
Yeah.
There's no question about it.
Yeah.
When I first came to Newmarket, that was one of the first things that struck me, is that
Yeah.
this is inappropriately zoned.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so perhaps this is an opportunity to correct that at the same time.
Well, yeah.
All right. Sounds like we have some work to do.
This has been an excellent discussion.
Yeah.
Feedback.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good feedback from the
Absolutely.
abutters and the people affected.
All right. So, does anybody else have anything to say? Hearing nothing, I'll close the
Well,
public.
no comments on
Comment
the rest of
section.
it.
Right,
We have
right.
other
Right.
we have other
That's-
pieces.
We're just, no, we take it one section at a time, right?
No.
Oh,
no.
okay, all right,
Not
all right,
necessarily.
all right, yeah, okay. All
We
right.
have other things to public hearing.
Yes, that's true. All right, so, if there's nothing else, any board members have any additional comments, recommendations, concerns, questions?
Just regarding the B3 of the M2?
Yes, yes, of course. No.
Move to the next one.
All right, we'll move on to the next one, which is continuation of non-conforming uses. Well, Diane, do you just want to walk through this real quickly? This is a, go ahead.
This has to do with the so-called grandfather clause in the town zoning ordinance. And after a certain period of time, you have vested rights, you have grandfathered rights to uses that are no longer allowed. And after a period of time, if that use has been abandoned, those rights are no longer available to you as a property owner. In the town zoning ordinance currently, it just says, any lawful nonconforming use may continue indefinitely in the event such use is abandoned for any period of time, its establishment shall not be permitted. And we've had several cases that come before the Zoning Board of Adjustment to determine whether or not the use was abandoned. And there was a lot of discussion back and forth, and at the time, one of the cases was right on Route 152. It was, a use that had been abandoned for 30 years, and I think it was pretty clear that that didn't qualify. But be that as it may, the zoning board had asked that, gee, it would be nice if we had some guidance on this, some clarity. And many communities in New Hampshire have ordinances that say after a year, after 2 years, if that use is abandoned and not resurrected, so to speak, then it shall not be permitted. So what we'd like to do is add some language to the ordinance so that it's clear what the period of time is. And the subcommittee of the planning board who looked at this is recommending a 1-year period. And we have some new language that we'd like to add, and I'll just read the language for the
Yes,
benefit of the
yep.
public. The new language would read, "Any non-conforming use may be continued, except that if any such non-conforming use is abandoned, desisted either voluntarily or by legal action, or caused to be discontinued for a period of 1 year, then any subsequent use of the building, structures, or use of the land shall be required to be in conformity with the town zoning regulations." So that clarifies it is a 1-year time frame, and that's what is being recommended by the subcommittee. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if people have questions on that, if the board has questions.
Anybody in the audience have any questions, comments on that? Nothing, any planning board members? Rosie?
Should there be a, when it says action caused to be discontinued for a period of 1 year, then any subsequent use of the building, other structures, or use of the land shall be required to be in conformity with the current
Yep.
regulations? There's not anything that says current
The
there.
current.
Well, that's a moot point, because this is in the zoning ordinance, so it's whatever's in that ordinance. That is what's
Right.
current.
Okay,
Right,
So I don't think you really need it.
right.
all
I
right,
agree.
okay.
Okay, so that's pretty straightforward, I think. So-
Glenn?
Just thinking on the 1 year versus the 2 year, is there just, see how it goes, and, yeah.
From an insurance perspective, it may be better to do 2 years, because if someone, let's say they have a residential house in a commercial zone and it burns down,
It's-
and there could be an issue with getting the insurance over that period of time to reconstruct. So,
Sometimes it takes more than a
Yeah.
year. So,
right, so I
mean,
just
I'm
don't,
Fine with 2 years.
I think Mr. Manso has something to add.
Yep.
Just a comment, this talks about structures on a property, and like my particular use on my property, there's no structure.
Right.
It's a grandfather gravel pit. But we've always, gravel pit owners have always gone by the, I don't know if it's a statute or what it is, but we've always said, you have to haul at least 200 yards out of your gravel pit in a year, or you're gonna lose your grandfather status. And that's something that most of us have followed over the years. And so, it's just that it only speaks of structures here, it doesn't talk about a piece of property.
That's
Well,
right.
No, and
Yeah.
use.
By use of
Use
land.
as well.
Any use,
The
yeah.
subsequent use of the building,
Yeah.
other structure, or use of the land, and that would apply to your situation.
Could I ask, Leo, is that a requirement in 155E of the 200
That's what I was going to
cubics?
say. I think that's part of the state law.
Is that the,
I think it is.
it might be in 155E, okay, I don't remember reading that. All right, thanks.
Glenn, my opinion is I'm fine with 2 years. 1 year is, if you do, I mean, Val said, if you have a fire and you're in an argument with your insurance company, you could easily
Well,
burn through a year.
again, it says voluntarily or by legal action, so if it burns down, it wasn't voluntary and it wasn't by legal action, so aren't they still covered?
What if you,
No, it's,
what if,
I
well,
wouldn't say a settlement of insurance is the legal action they're referring to. I think they're talking about, if it's
Right,
being.
so if it burns down, it didn't it wasn't
voluntary.
voluntary,
Voluntary.
and it wasn't because of a legal reason that it fell out of compliance, if it's just not the timing. I mean, if someone came before the board and said, it burned down, and I'm trying to rebuild within the 12 months, but I might need a little more time, that wouldn't be taken under advisement, or?
Could we put a sub-paragraph to
sir,
allow
if you,
that?
hold on one second. Go ahead.
Could we put a sub-paragraph to Peter's point of
I'm just saying,
allowing?
The planning board has the discretion of increasing this to 2 years under extenuating circumstances, which
Adding
would
a
address
year.
the insurance settlement
Right.
issue.
Yeah.
Or if there's some,
That makes sense.
Yeah,
personal hardship that needs to be considered.
Yeah, I think I have the perfect case. We live in Norton Lane. There's 24 acres, and the house was built in probably 1970. But there was an existing two-story structure, the Norton house. It's been there forever. It's not there anymore. But after 8 years of paying taxes, a value that went from on that house that was totally inhabitable of tax assessment of $100,000. And the only reason I kept it, because of all the circumstances around the zoning and the aquifer, is that if that house was in the middle of a business area, and so it was grandfathered, because it's always been there, and I kept it in case I wanted to build a second house, possibly I could. But then when I looked into it a little further, the restrictions, instead of a 2-acre lot, because it was in an aquifer next to gravel pits, that I'd need 3 acres. So between the taxes and subdividing 3 acres, kind of just had to let it go. So I took it down, but now they're reconsidering, and the zoning may change, possibly, could do, it sounds like there's a possibility of maybe going back to residential. Maybe having that 2-year time. I only took it down last year because I got tired of looking at it, and it was kind of an insurance, people coming out to look at it and whatever, so.
Thank you.
Okay.
But that was voluntarily.
Yes, but
Doesn't this need an or in here?
I think you're right.
It's after desisted. Yep.
well,
It's abandoned, desisted, or either voluntary or by legal action caused to be discontinued for a period of 1 year.
Or instead of either? Say that again, Val, I'm sorry.
Correct, or.
So desisted
or
or voluntarily or by legal action.
Caused to be discontinued.
Okay, I think you're right.
Comma,
Yep.
for a period.
Or taxed out.
Caused to be discontinued for a period.
The lowest I could get it was a $30,000 tax value on a place that hadn't been lived in 25 years.
what's the pleasure of the board? Do we want to go to 2 years? 2 years makes it straightforward.
Well, and the whole intent here is at least put a date out there. We
Yes.
don't have
So
one now.
it's not,
Yes. I mean, I could argue that, Peter, you started to say about a house burns down, but what if,
Well, what if
I
it's-
thought your language of saying, the ability to extend it to 2 years,
okay.
I would
That's
rather
fine.
have it, but I would rather,
you just
I
want
would
to.
rather have everybody have the same 2 years as opposed to having to come to the planning board
Save a
and
trip
I'll give
to
you
the
2
planning
years,
board.
but I won't give you 2
The
years or
language
whatever.
correction, that corrected it, though.
I think that corrects the
Okay.
issue.
Okay.
So everybody's all set with that?
So we're going to go to 2 years? Okay, I'm good with that.
Okay.
All righty, yes, now we're on to accessory apartments.
Okay. Under the Town of Newmarket zoning ordinance, accessory apartments are permitted under section 7.03, which was last amended in 2004. An accessory apartment is an apartment that is part of the single-family home, and there are certain conditions under which they're allowed. An applicant has to go to the zoning board of adjustment and receive what we call a special conditional use permit or a special exception in order to get an accessory apartment. And did I say the planning board is the zoning board of adjustment? Recently, the state has made some revisions to the state law, and it was amended in 2015 and 2016. And under the new state law, the town needs to make some modifications. So what we have in effect here in Newmarket is consistent with the state law. And the purpose of these zoning changes is to bring our local ordinance into compliance. And we're recommending that there be, and there's an extra one here, sorry, that there be 8 changes. Hang on, where's my revised one? Here it is. There are 8 changes that are being suggested. Do I have my right copy here? Thank you. Okay. I'm reading off the old one. Okay, so, the first change is, what we'd like to do is identify that accessory apartments are allowed in all residential districts that permit single-family residential uses. And there's a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 zones in our zoning map where these types of uses are allowed. So this just clarifies that wherever single-family residential uses are permitted, accessory apartments are permitted as well. We're suggesting that language be removed that makes reference to, under the purpose statement, right now, there's a section that provides the purpose is to allow the provision of small, affordable residential units for segments of the population to help homeowners utilize excess space to generate revenue to help offset the cost of home ownership and to encourage adaptive reuse of historic homes. There was a sentence, the last section in that, sentence in that section that I think might be subject to legal challenge if it was employed in fashion where it could be, which it says to balance as the number of bedrooms and accessory apartments is severely limited to prevent excess growth in the number of school-age children. And I think that we recognize that we can't discriminate against school-age children, so it'd be appropriate to remove that section from the town zoning ordinance. The third change, under the new state law, you can't just have an accessory apartment within the confines of the footprint of the existing single-family home. You have to provide an opportunity for an applicant to build an attachment or addition to their home to accommodate the accessory apartment. So we are changing that section to add the language "or attached to clarify that it's in compliance with that. Fourth change has to do with minimum and maximum sizes. And under the new state law, you can provide some restrictions on the size of accessory apartments. However, they cannot be less than 700, the maximum cannot be less than 700 square feet. And the planning board had a discussion, a workshop session about this. One of the new requirements, which we'll go into in the next paragraph, is that you have to provide the opportunity for not just one bedroom or a studio apartment, but for 2 bedrooms. So I think the thought was that by increasing the square footage on the maximum by 200 feet, you'd be making that a more usable space for the occupant of the
So that goes from
accessory
800 to
apartment.
1,000.
So it goes from 800 square feet to 1,000.
Right.
The fifth change is inserting the language "or 2-bedroom apartment," so that it's consistent with the state law. Item 6 pertains to exterior changes to the building. And currently, our ordinance reads that no exterior changes shall be made which significantly alters the appearance of the structure from the street. And we're suggesting that we change the language and so that it follows and echoes, if you will, what's in the state law, which basically says no exterior changes shall be made unless they maintain the aesthetic continuity of the accessory dwelling unit with the principal dwelling unit as a single-family dwelling, so that it fits into the character of the neighborhood is the intent. The 7th change has to do with interior doors, and this comes right out of the state law. And it says that an interior door shall be provided between the principal dwelling unit and the accessory dwelling. However, it is not required to be unlocked. In some communities, we're saying, well, you can have an accessory apartment, but you can't lock it. It has to be part of the integral part of the household. So that's the 7th change. The 8th change is we thought it would be helpful to add some clarifications on what is an accessory dwelling and what is accessory versus the principal dwelling. And we've added some language to the ordinance to help clarify what that is. And I think it's pretty straightforward. Basically, the principal dwelling unit is one. It's the predominant use of the property, and the accessory is an accessory use. And it's subordinate, if you will, to the principal dwelling. And we need to add the language, which I didn't change, at the very last line of accessory dwelling should say a studio, a 1-bedroom apartment, or a 2-bedroom apartment. There was one change that we noted that didn't get changed, so I'd like to incorporate that if there's going to be a motion this evening.
All righty.
How many
And
public
that's the
hearings
changes.
are we required to have?
Just one.
Does anybody in the public anybody out there have anything to say regarding to these proposed changes? No? Okay. Board members?
Just a quick question for clarification. So when people are looking at, say, an in-law apartment, right? What about like parking, all of those types of things? And does anything else have to be done regarding anything with that, like traffic flow, anything like that?
They're only granted
There's
for
a
special use.
requirement currently in our special use criteria. Item 4 says there shall be a minimum of 2 parking spaces per unit, which is defined as a 9 by 18, and the parking cannot be permitted, or is not permitted within the setbacks of the property.
That's my fault, thank you.
That's okay. So we're covered on that.
Roseanne?
In regards to it being internal or attached, the law states that it requires municipalities to allow internal or attached accessory dwelling in all zoning districts where single-family. But the law also gives municipalities the option of permitting detached ADUs, which is an accessory dwelling in a building not attached. So we have the option of not permitting detached.
You exercise the option that in the current zoning, we don't allow detached.
We don't allow it, and I didn't change that.
We don't
There's
allow.
no change to that.
We do not allow
We're not-
detached.
I thought the way it was read that we are
No.
going to allow
No.
detached.
No, you can
No.
do an addition
You can
for
do
one.
an attachment to your house,
Okay,
an addition,
okay.
which is different than a detached unit.
And this law requires municipalities to allow accessory dwelling. In other words, we must
Yes.
adhere
Be-
to
right,
this. We
correct.
cannot deny it.
And there are some
Have to have
communities that
regulations to allow.
haven't allowed them, and if they take no action on this, then, you know, their state law will preempt the local ordinance.
Because like I said, when I had my rant at the workshop, is that, you know, most towns in New Hampshire our size have an average of 15% multi-unit dwellings.
That's right.
And we have over 50%. And by doing something like this, especially if it's allowed to be detached, you're just creating tons more of
Yeah, it's a moot point because we're not allowing detached.
multi-family dwellings, yeah.
Right.
And is that the reason you don't allow detached? Is you're worried about that, or what's the reason for that?
honestly-
Like a granny pod or
I
something?
wasn't here, I don't know the process of
Right.
what
We'll
the...
never be
Yeah, what's
allowed to
the-
Newmarket unless.
No,
we
but
do-
I'm wondering why, so that everybody can understand why.
But it is allowed, the ZBA has allowed, and when I was on ZBA, they have allowed.
If it's an option from the state. So if anybody came in and said, why did we do that? Why did we do that?
It's an option, it doesn't say we have to.
No, I know,
Why
but
we did
why wouldn't we?
I wasn't here.
I'm a big proponent of detached
Valerie, you were
accessory
here when
structures.
this-
I was part of the committee.
She was part of the committee way back, was it 10
And
years or more ago?
Yeah, and the committee actually recommended the detached. It was the town council because of exactly what
Interesting.
their position relative to, you know, Roseanne's position as well, is that they felt that that would encourage more multi-family units.
I may have to go
And that's
back and
why I
research that.
suggested we take out that language about school-age children. because-
Oh, it's the school-aged children that is the issue?
No, it was more that
In some-
people felt Newmarket had an overabundance of multifamily dwelling units, and that was a burden on the tax,
It is.
you know, payers.
Okay.
I think, yeah, if you have that language in there, it makes it suspect to legal
Right.
challenge.
Which is why I,
And I'm not disputing that, I just wanted to know the reasoning behind it.
Dale, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the thing that's confusing about accessory dwelling units, and I'm not, questioning what the law is and that we have to follow the law. I think sometimes it's like, one of the things we try to weigh as we create zoning, and we're talking about the various parts of the time, is what is the right density? And so if you are determining that this is an appropriate density, and you're placing some restriction on people, this is some way that can significantly increase the density beyond what you might have originally intended, because the ADUs are there, and that's just the way it is. So I think all of this is a balance between landowner rights and the sort of the community that people want to live in terms of what's the right density in a certain area, how should that, how if you're going to do a development, what the development's going to look like, where the house is going to be, so if you create these developments, allow certain parcels, a certain layout of the homes and stuff like that, then having detached ADUs is sort of going to be, I think it makes it more confusing to try to understand what the impact of that development is.
Very good point.
All right, so
So.
what's
and
the
then we
pleasure of the
have-
board?
We have one more change
Oh.
on our public hearing list.
Oh,
This is an
geez,
easy
yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah.
This is an easy one. There was a state law that was passed in 2016 by former Governor Hassan regarding the application deadlines for materials submitted to the planning board. Previously, you had 15 days prior to the next scheduled meeting to submit your application, and the legislature changed that to 21 days to give the communities and staff more time to process the applications and get them ready and so forth. So it's no longer 15 days, so we need to change our local regulations to reflect the state law, which is 21 days. And we're suggesting changes to the site review regulations as well as the subdivision regulations.
Pretty straightforward, just to coincide. Skip, come on up, please. Yeah.
Question on that. So if you're in the process of submitting a subdivision and it's an ongoing thing where there's more than one meeting, so does that not only pertain to the original application, but materials needed between meetings?
It is intended just for the initial application. This planning board has a policy, a standing policy, that it needs to be submitted 10 days in advance of the meeting, and that gives us, the staff, time to get the plans over to Public Works, over to
Sure.
the engineer, to make sure they're happy with the revisions, so we can go forward with a recommendation at the next planning board meeting.
Which is certainly necessary. I just wanted to make sure that this wasn't affecting that
No,
timeline.
this is just for the initial
Application.
application
Initial
for
application.
acceptance. Yep.
Thank you.
Good question.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anybody else out there have anything? All right, with that, at 7:58, I will close the public hearing. What is the pleasure of the board?
I'll make a motion on, that we amend our subdivision and site review regulations as proposed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Peter? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Val?
Make a motion that we amend our section 7.03 of the town zoning ordinance regarding accessory apartments as proposed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those
Is this for
opposed?
accessories?
This is,
Yeah.
could you repeat that for me, I'm sorry? That we recommended to the town council. We don't have the authority to change the zoning ordinance. Right. But we have, this is the planning board's
Yes.
recommendation.
Recommend
Planning
changes.
board will recommend,
Okay.
make a motion, planning board recommends to
Okay.
change section
Yeah.
7.03.
Resecond that?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Val, non-conforming uses?
Make a recommendation, make a motion that the planning board recommend to the Newmarket Town Council to amend section 105, nonconformity in our zoning ordinance, as proposed and amended. or number 1, that shall read, any non-conforming use may be continued, except that if any such non-conforming use is abandoned, desisted, or voluntarily by legal action caused to be discontinued, comma, for a period of 2 years, then any subsequent use of the building, other structure, or use of the land shall be required to be in conformity with the provisions of these regulations.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Second by Peter. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. You want to do the next one? What do we want to do with that one?
I'd like to hear if the board feels that more discussion needs to be made on this.
On which one?
The first,
On the first one.
economic development, making those changes.
And especially in light of the Ash Swamp Road, and do we really even think about, as part of this, that there would be, I don't mean to run into this, but does it make sense to do a zoning map change along Ash Swamp
Yeah.
Road?
I think it does.
We can
I
still
think
still
we should-
work on our CCRC.
And that could be part of the CCRC proposal.
What's the, I was going to ask what what your expected time frame would be to make further recommendations? I mean, are we,
Committee's working on
I
that.
mean, are we, do you thinking, is it within the next 6 months?
Oh,
Oh,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Oh.
We're- yeah.
Oh,
As a matter of
okay.
fact, I was going to suggest if the committee could get together before everybody heads out on vacation the next couple of weeks, so we
Yeah.
can
I mean, I would,
move it
Going.
forward.
Yeah,
I would personally
I'd
like to put this on
re-examine that
hold
again,
and do
yeah.
do it all at one time. If there's
Yeah.
going to be other changes, do them all at one time so
Especially
we can
with what we
have.
heard from the public
input.
tonight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think we should reconsider some of the aspects of that.
It would be
and not approve
wonderful
it.
if it were going to be ready for the combined planning board, town council. I don't know if that's possible.
It could be.
I think we were.
March 1st?
No, we don't have, we have to have a public
Public
hearing in
hearing.
advance.
But it would be
We-
good to get input from the council on what
Yeah.
the idea is.
With
Right.
whatever we.
So perhaps
we
to have a draft by then.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think we were hoping to have something to give them to show we're making some progress.
Yeah.
But that's up to the board.
Yeah. I think that should be re-examined.
So we want to just
absolutely.
table that? I think
Table it.
Table that, for no, not vote on it at this point, right?
We'll make a motion to table.
Well, because it's part of a public hearing, I would just move it to, let's just
We'll
keep
just
moving
move
it.
it to-
Continue it.
Continue it.
Continue it.
Okay, just,
I'll
We'll
make a
have
motion to
check on that, whether
continue.
you can do that first, any changes.
We have to
Yeah.
continue to a time certain, right?
Yeah.
Which is,
Well, we're not continuing the public hearing, we're continuing our consideration.
yeah, okay, right, okay.
well, if we
We've
make
already had our
change,
public
but if
hearing,
we
we've
make
already closed
change,
it.
but if we make changes to it, then we'd have to open the public
Absolutely.
hearing again,
Yes.
yeah.
Substantive changes.
We'll end up having a
yes.
new public hearing, I think,
Yeah.
because there'll be a significant
Substantive
additions, revisions,
changes.
or whatever. Yeah,
Okay.
okay. So, there was a motion to continue. Is there a second?
You need a date,
Do we need a,
you need a date to continue to?
well, I'm thinking also, do we just take no
Well,
further
just-
action on it pending?
Well, then we'd have to
You gotta read,
re-advertise.
right.
Yeah.
Let's
When's our
just
next-
continue to the next meeting, which is February 14th.
Yes, yes.
Isn't that Valentine's Day?
It is Valentine's
It
Day.
is.
Is there a second?
Second.
You saying you're not going to be here, Rosie?
Oh, I'll be.
Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor of continuing to February 14th, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you all. Thank you all for your input tonight.
Thank you.
It was actually very helpful. All right, we're going to go to new old business. One thing I want to see if I can get it on my phone here. Just this evening, Ezra told me, sent me an email saying he couldn't be at the meeting tonight, but he also resigned from the planning board. I will just for the record, I'll read this in real quickly. This is from Ezra Temko. Excuse me, Skip, you guys go out and talk, please? Thank you.
Take it outside.
That's all right. This is from Ezra Temko. Good evening, I cannot be in attendance tonight. On that note, I apologize, but at this point, I need to resign from the Newmarket Planning Board. Thank you for your understanding, and thanks for the service you all give to our town. I'll be in touch with the town clerk's office to see what I need to do to make it official. Respectfully and regretfully, Ezra. I received that this evening, so that's unfortunate.
In timing-wise, it's too late to get on. No,
No, it's
there
just
is.
starting
January
So,
25th
start.
starts tomorrow.
So that would be if we accept the
minute.
resignation tonight,
Yeah.
right? Well, it's two things.
Oh, okay.
He's resigning, so if we accept his resignation, we can appoint someone to fulfill his
Until
term,
someone else is appointed.
which is probably.
But is the
that's-
deadline too late
No.
to get on the ballot?
Hasn't started yet.
No,
It's
no,
just starting.
It's just starting, okay,
It
that's right.
starts tomorrow, January 25th,
That's right.
but I believe there's a stipulation in an RSA that if
But I think we're just supposed to fulfill his term.
Yes.
So it
Ju-
wouldn't be an
just-
open
it-
term anyway.
it could be something that could be put in a warrant article to replace for 1 year if it falls within a certain time. I think it's a 6-month time frame. If it falls within a 6-month time frame prior to the election, then you can put it in the warrant article for the remainder of the term of the person who resigned. If not, you can just appoint someone to fill it in, so, but you
So
might
we
want to
can-
check with Terry in the town clerk's office, but I know there's a 6-month stipulation somewhere, either warrant article or appoint.
Okay, thank you, Roseanne.
We'll either appoint somebody to fulfill his term, or it'll be an open seat for an election in this coming election.
Exactly, just for the remainder term, which I think is 1 year? Does he have
I don't-
one?
I
I think he
honestly
just
don't
has 1 year
I think
left.
that sounds right.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
have, there is a person who's visited the planning office who's indicated he's interested in running as
Good.
an alternate, not running, but being considered by the board. And he said he would be submitting an application, so we'll probably have that for the February 14th meeting.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, new old business, chairman's report. One thing I have to say, after our last meeting, I've heard scuttlebutt that the zoning board is not happy with us because of comments that were made. So I just will reiterate to people that we're here as the planning board, our job is not to make comments on what other boards do. We do what we legally authorized to do and stay away from editorial comments on other boards. Other than that, I have nothing. Committee reports?
We have a work session on the Attorney Gradigan's letter. We have a revised agenda. I'm sorry.
Oh. Oh, okay.
Something that we wanted to cover in our work session that we didn't have a chance to. And I also have some revised signage changes.
Yeah, okay.
If you want to go over those?
Well, yes,
I don't know
yes.
if you want to go over those, or you want to hold off on them. It's up to you.
I'm fine with, if people want to stay and go over them, I'm fine with going over them. Or if not, I'm fine with that too. So, what's the,
I think the sooner we go over them, the sooner we can get them posted
I agree.
for a public hearing.
Is everybody okay with going over them?
Okay.
Okay?
So you want to do the sign first? before
Yes.
Radigan's? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, you should all have a document that has in the header revised January 24th, 2017, for sign requirements, signage amendments. And I basically went back and edited the documents, including the feedback and changes that were suggested at the work session meeting. And I think they're pretty straightforward. And why don't we jump right to page 3? And page 3, at the bottom, paragraph 9. Well, we already talked about these.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, these are changes that are being made. Okay, in paragraph 9, Valerie, you had suggested that we clarify that non-projecting signs shall be allowed within the public right-of-way,
Yeah, unless they're otherwise permitted. was the
unless
issue.
otherwise permitted, and I've added that language to reflect that, and I think
Shall
that
not
covers
be
that.
allowed within the public right of way.
Diana, is a
Shall-
copy of that up on the table?
No.
They were on the
Here's
table.
one here. Here you go.
That one for some reason.
They were on the
It was-
desk
it's
here when
probably
we
in the
first
bottom
came
of
in. It's
your
probably in the very
pile.
bottom of
Oh,
this.
I
Put it out.
didn't have any. Okay, thanks.
So it should say, non-projecting signs, unless otherwise permitted, shall not be allowed within the public right-of-way. That's what it should be.
Correct.
That's
Okay.
right.
Yep.
Is everybody happy with that?
Yep.
All right, so we go to the next page. And we had a lot of discussion about subdivision signs. And I have drafted some language to include in the zoning And in addition to that, I'm on page 4, the highlighted paragraph 16. And it was suggested that we should probably say that identification signs for subdivisions, if they're pre-approved by the planning board as part of the subdivision review process, that they be exempt from the sign requirements. And that is what I've attempted to do. We may want to, massage the language a little bit.
So,
But the idea is that it's not a directional sign, it's an identification sign that says, Piscassic Village Open Space Development. So it identifies the subdivision, and the size can't exceed 12 square feet in size, or 6 feet in height, and it's to be at the entrance of the subdivision, but it cannot be in the public right-of-way, and it would be pre-approved by the planning board as part of the subdivision
So we
review
need
process.
and in there.
And
Yeah.
is pre-approved
Public
by
right of
the
way
planning board
and
as,
is.
As part of the subdivision regs, yeah.
And is pre-approved?
and an as need to be added in.
Yeah.
Where's the as? Planning board, as
And
part.
as
Okay.
approved.
This is a rough draft, Mike.
Oh, yes, yes.
So it's,
Okay.
yeah,
Real
and as
rough.
approved.
so refresh my memory, because wasn't there quite a bit of discussion that in certain circumstances, if you have a stone,
We're going to talk about that.
that's later?
That's
Later.
Yep.
Okay.
We put the details of that in a separate, you want to go right to that, since we were on that track?
Sorry, me.
Okay.
And, excuse me, one more thing, I think we need to take the word pre out of that,
It should be as
It is
approved.
and as
As
approved.
approved by the planning board as part of the subdivision review
Yes.
process.
Yep.
And then we've just deleted the business about a directional sign,
Yep.
because that, it's misleading. There is another section in the ordinance about directional signs, and they can't be larger than 2 square feet, so. We'll clarify that.
With this section, does it allow for reviewing of aesthetic qualities of that sign for the subdivisions?
That's part of the planning
Part of
board.
the- part of the planning
We're
board,
gonna
yep.
talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So why don't we jump to that section? It's on the very last page.
I see.
And I was trying to figure out where we want to put this, and we do have a section 309, which talks about landscaping. And I thought that maybe we could tie it to the one that Val was talking about is very nicely landscaped, and it's very aesthetically pleasing, and it's a nice gateway to the neighborhood. So I thought I'd tie it to the landscaping section. And I stole this, I'll be very honest, from my old employer, the town of Merrimack, so I guess I have some proprietary rights to borrow their materials. That's the very first section, and it makes sense to me. Basically, want to have a nicely designed landscaped entrance using a variety of materials that are not non-invasive and are adapted to our environment here in Newmarket.
So I have a question, this is probably directed to Roseanne. We keep using the term non-invasive species, but obviously, because they're really not allowed, right? You can't buy them now. But is there enough native species available, and I'm thinking from a water perspective, that could be utilized in these landscaping areas? Or
Well,
is that
doesn't
too,
have
is
to-
it
Non-native
too
and then there's
limiting
invasive.
if we require them?
Native to be non-invasive.
No, I
Those-
understand that, but,
different
so that's
things.
more my question. But if it's a native plant species, it's typically not going to be a species that will require more fertilizing or more water or
You would
things
want to
like that.
specify native?
My question is, would it be too limiting to specify native species?
I wouldn't specify native, because most of the native ones are not good-looking.
That's a little different story.
I wouldn't for that
Okay.
reason,
I
but
just-
it would really limit, I mean, a lot
think
of
it
the
would
very
limit it.
popular
Right.
landscape
And
plants
there's some
are-
native
aren't-
species that could be invasive as well, so,
Okay.
so I
Right,
wouldn't.
that was just a
limit to-
question.
Limit to native.
Okay, now
This is well worded, I like this.
Okay, the second part of this is what I patched together based on our discussion last week.
Yeah.
So it probably doesn't flow as well, but it's open for discussion and comment and tweaking.
I'm fine with it, it gives us the latitude to put the planning board to put a second sign up. If they
Looks good
wish
to
to do
me.
it. I'm fine with
That
that.
are been well.
As I said, it was the last
I'm a little
minute.
bit taken back by the landscaping stuff, but it says it's encouraged, doesn't say it's required, so that's that's fine. This is changes to the sign section, not the landscaping section. But I think that's appropriate because of what we're changing, right?
This is changing the landscaping section.
Right.
Right.
I'm just
Okay.
acknowledging
Which is not what we
that.
set out to do. We
Right,
originally set
right.
out to change the
Yeah,
sign thing.
Right, right.
But we, yeah.
But they're together,
We still
yes.
have it, and this is in
Yes.
more detail. Okay,
Yes.
and then we had this discussion last week about, well, what about a stone wall, which you want to have a sign on one side or another side so that people go in both directions, and that makes a lot of sense. So I think I reworded it so that it says the planning board may approve a two-sided sign, which is okay, or an addition of a second sign if located on a monument or stone wall or within a landscape setting. So if they do a nice little design with the landscape,
That's fine.
then
Yep.
we have the option of allowing a second sign. Does that work?
Do we legally have the option, if it's not allowed under the zoning, to have the two signs?
Maybe we need to tweak that then,
Yeah,
to say.
I think so.
Excuse me.
So we could have to say we may approve the addition of the second sign. We can't approve a two-sided sign because it's not allowed in the zoning,
Right.
right?
I think that just needs to make sure that it's our authority is, our authority under the subdivision is not superseded by what the zoning ordinance would allow.
Okay.
So maybe that just needs to be tweaked a little.
Or two signs as provided by the planning board.
Well, I think we have to say it may approve, we have to take out the two-sided signs, right? Because we can't approve a two-sided sign.
Why don't we move all of the
but we do-
requirements under
we have them in-
subdivision and just say what is exempt is identification signs, and it's subdivision identification signage, right? As approved by the planning board.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then put these requirements into the subdivision regs.
Okay, could, go back again. I'm
So
sorry.
in the zoning ordinance,
Right.
the exempt sign would be subdivision identification signs as approved by the planning board as part of the subdivision review process.
Okay, so not indicate a number
Right.
or size.
Correct. So
Right.
that, a subdivision identification sign is exempt as long as the planning board has approved it as part of the subdivision
Okay,
process.
Provided it's approved by the planning board as part, okay.
And then
That
within
simplifies
the
it.
subdivision process, if it's just one identification sign, because it's not in a stone wall or something, these restrictions would apply.
Right. Yep.
Or just a one entrance sign.
Where does it say you can't have two-sided signs? In the
Because it,
regular-
under here, what's exempt is only one identification sign.
Oh,
is
okay,
exempt.
I'm with you, okay. But that doesn't mean we can't, the planning board can't require a two-sided sign as part of its
We
jurisdiction.
could require one, sure.
Yeah,
Or we could permit
we
them.
could permit them,
But I don't think we could permit it if it's
excluded.
only
elsewhere.
allowing one under zoning.
I gotcha,
Right.
okay. Thank you.
We don't prohibit two-sided signs anyway. I mean, if you get a permit
No,
for a
two
sign.
signs, not two-sided
Oh,
signs.
okay.
Two signs.
Okay, two signs. The additional,
So maybe I should just take out the reference to two-sided,
Yes.
because I
Yeah.
thought that
yeah,
Yes.
just the
was
two-sided.
part of what you were
is-
saying.
Yeah.
Just think that
Okay, just say the planning board
subdivision
may
signs are
approve-
basically exempt,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
As long as the approval has come from the planning board, or whatever that's,
Planning
that
board may
sign or
approve the
those
addition.
signs are.
Right. All righty.
I thought,
Okay.
can I ask a question? Weren't we have on page 2, sign neon, and then on page 3, section 6, neon style, and then page 6B, neon. Weren't we talking before about just
You got the
saying
right version?
illuminated versus neon?
No, I thought we were gonna,
Or we're gonna
oh, I
keep
have, I
neon?
haven't
We're going
done
to
anything
keep
with-
neon, so what we ended up with, I believe.
I thought we were
I
going to
haven't-
say illuminated because neon was,
That's almost unused now.
I mean, illuminated covers neon, right?
Yeah, I didn't do anything with the definitions, those, the old definitions that were in there.
Oh, okay.
So if we need to change that, I guess we need to.
For the purposes of this ordinance, a neon sign is not considered an internally illuminated sign, but is defined separate.
Yeah, I thought that.
Oh, that's just light shining on
Yes.
illumination.
Yes. I thought we were gonna,
I'm a little bit confused, because it seems like I can remember. It was a complicated discussion a little bit, wasn't it? And didn't Mike say something about neon signs or some technology like that? Because that's where you get.
LED, the LED.
Yeah, and I did.
Well,
That's why I
LEDs are
think we
different,
kept
because that gives you
neon
a
style.
Screen, a rectangular. But neon is where you have, it's
No, but
what
Yeah.
a neon sign looks like. It's blown glass, a bent
tubular.
fluorescent, all of that thing. So it's really kind of hard to put, isn't it hard to put that in the same category as a rectangular illuminated sign?
No, because neon is basically, it's just a sign made with neon gas.
Right.
You could make it whatever shape you want it to be, and I thought we just had the discussion that
It was all gonna be
if it's illumi-
style.
Anything that's illuminated, so an LED is illuminated, neon is illuminated, so it's an electrically or illuminated sign, because neon has electricity going to it.
Right.
LED
But if
But
you
then
say
we
you
also
limit
had
it
the
to two-
discussion on the
If you
town
limit-
hall.
I changed it to one neon/LED hyphen style. That's what I heard the board say.
Right.
that's on page
Change it to.
6, right.
And that's on page 6.
Right.
If I didn't catch that someplace else in the ordinance, that's a good call, and we need to make that change.
Right.
I think,
Yeah,
and
in
that's
the-
what we ended up with.
In
was
the
that.
workshop, it was just neon dash style. So wherever neon appeared was neon dash style.
Okay,
Right.
so we
Under the
need to
definition.
change the definition. Use the same definition, but just change it to the neon/LED style. But leave the definition as is.
So when I think of that, I think of in a lot of these businesses, they'll have an open sign that is not neon and is not LED, it's fluorescent. And that's why, to your point, the illuminated sign, may not be the right language.
Well, no,
Maybe I'm
because
nitpicking.
that's an exempt sign, under exempt signs, number 6, they can have a sign in the window, unless it's a neon LED style sign, so.
It's not.
There's nothing stopping them from
Okay.
putting a fluorescent paper open sign in their door or window.
Right.
Right? Okay. That's
correct.
all right.
So,
Okay, can we go back now to where we
yes.
left off?
Sandwich boards?
So that's okay.
But just on the neon, one last thing on that, so, because if you have, when you say 4 square feet, a neon sign, if it's written out in script, it could be a foot high by 5 or 6, so that would be, in other words, it's not a solid area. A neon is more of a length. So when you say 4 square feet on that, that's by whatever the greatest height is, by the greatest width, that's how you're coming up with 4 square feet. Even
The
though,
enclosing rectangle of the sign.
Where's
The
4
message
square
area.
feet? I don't know where that's coming from. I'm sorry.
On B.
on B, it says message area shall not exceed 4 square feet. I mean, that's kind of small for a neon sign. I'm okay with that. I don't think we have a lot of neon
Is that under the
signs.
general design standards?
What page are you on, please?
6.
Top.
Oh, okay, thank you, that helps. Where does it say, okay, message area shall not exceed.
We should
okay.
define that, because certainly can make an argument that if I wrote a sign 6 inches,
Yep.
6-inch
Right,
letters,
here's my message
I could be
area.
20 feet long.
Yep.
because-
It's not covered, it's not a very massive
Right.
sign, and
Right.
I thought when Mike talked about it, he thought, like, for certain looks, it's kind of attractive to allow neon signage, so I don't care.
There is a, because I went over this before with Mike, there is a definition for sign message area, and it is to be incidental to the sign itself, where the message area consists of letter symbols, logos, yada, yada, shall be measured by a single continuous rectangular perimeter drawn to enclose the extreme limits of the sign elements.
Perfect.
That
So
answers
you
his
have to
question?
draw right around
Just
it,
the question.
period.
Right.
Yep.
So anything that can fit in that 4 feet.
Anything that can fit in that 4 feet.
Yep, okay, that answers that.
So do we keep the
Yes.
language here?
Yeah.
Yep, we're
Yeah.
fine with that, yep. Okay, Diane?
Where were we?
Sandwich boards.
Sandwich
Sandwich
boards.
boards.
Sandwich
Okay, we
boards
had a
was-
lot of discussion
that
about
was going
the
to-
placement, and
That was going to get moved to, not the exempt section, that was gonna be moved to the permitted section with all of the requirements.
okay.
So it'd be permitted as long as it met all these requirements.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
But I do remember there was a compromise, that the distance where possible.
Yep, you got all that.
You did a
36
range.
inches as a minimum.
Yep.
Yep, you got all that. But that section just goes
needs
under
to be
permitted.
Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
So, I know it sounds stupid, but what about sandwich boards that people wear?
That's clothing.
As long as they're 36 to 48 inches.
I mean, we care
no
about that.
different than a t-shirt.
No, exactly, it's not. It shouldn't be, exactly.
Not
So we
blocking
don't
the
care about
sidewalk.
that.
Does that get covered under our moving sign?
Moving and breathing signs.
So Diane, that's all under L
So we're moving
on
all of that,
page 7,
okay, because I did add a new L.
but all that language goes under L.
Everything goes here.
Yeah.
Message,
The message
sandwich
board.
board goes under there.
Oh, L, so I guess it's gonna be M, right, sandwich boards?
You want a new bullet?
Yeah.
Well, it's different than a
Yeah,
message board, right?
Yes.
So it goes under L, M, message board. I mean, sandwich board.
Okay. All right, so, okay, and then we had a lot of discussion about whether we would allow balloons and flags and illumination and decorations to be placed on the sign, and I think
No.
I heard the consensus was, no, we don't want all this stuff on the signs, it looks tacky. So I made that change. We had a lot of discussion about the notion of interchangeable letters. I've taken that out of the section pertaining to internal illumination and the bottom of page 5. And we did add some
It
language.
went to L on page
It went
7.
to L on page 7.
Yeah.
That's the top. So that took care of that. Okay, now I'm on page 6 in the discussion of the neon LED style. And we don't want it to blink or flash. And I added in C the language about animated signs, and that was suggested by Peter. Are you okay with that? D, flashing, blinking, I took out the reference to the temperature business so that we don't need to go there. And I added electronic message centers to the text, because that had already been added. Okay. Going to the bottom of page 6K, I took out the whole section on flags and just prohibited feather flags and pennants. And on page 8 in the table of sizes, I changed the dimension from 8 feet, which it was in the last iteration, to 12 square feet, and that was in response to Valerie's suggestion.
On R1.
Just for
In
our.
the R1, correct. And page 9. Oh, the discussion about the message area. And as you know, Mike went out
Yeah,
with
he
some great
sent that stuff
photographs
out.
and showed some different graphic examples of the percentages. And I just put in what I thought made sense, and Mike and I both talked about this, that 3% looked to be really good.
Yeah.
It's not a lot, and it fits really in nicely with the scale of our downtown. We said, well, if people want to go a little bit larger, then they can ask the planning board for special approval, and I think that was something that he found in Concord, New Hampshire's ordinance. So I thought that was a nice compromise. I don't know how you feel about it. Peter had some suggestions on how we might present this in the final document. Do you want to
Well,
talk about that a second?
I liked Mike's pictures, but I thought the pictures might just be enhanced by sort of, same thing, sort of drawing a measured bounding rectangle of a building and the sign, just so that you could actually physically see, what percentage. So, like he had a picture of the side of the Kennebunk Savings Bank building, which was a good one, because you got a big square. It would
Yeah.
just be nice to be able to know this is whatever, 30-foot wide building and a 10-foot wide
Okay.
sign or whatever.
Right.
So it would be nice to just have a couple
Put
of
some
actual examples there that
Dimensions in to
Yeah.
just
just.
illustrate it.
Just an illustration. yeah.
Yeah.
Can I make one more suggestion too? Is that, if we're talking, say, 3%, whatever it is, then there's a note here of 5% with planning board approval. Shouldn't that be with ZBA approval? We're not gonna have everybody.
You take it right out, because ZBA can approve whatever,
Yeah, the
under
ZBA,
a zoning
yeah.
ordinance.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's what I'm saying.
Or you could,
Or
if you really
special.
want to complicate it, you could say by special use permit.
Because then it doesn't run with it only runs with the
ZBA.
business,
Right.
though, special use permit,
Right.
right? So then,
Right.
if the business changed, the sign might change.
Or 5% with planning board approval of a special use permit.
Why don't we put 3 to 5% with planning board approval? So we leave that open, that we can decide what's appropriate.
Well,
3
And everyone that wants to sign us to
I
come
don't-
to the planning
Yeah, I don't
board.
want, see, I don't want anybody that
Yeah,
needs a
we
sign
don't-
to come to the planning board.
Only if they want a special use permit for a larger sign.
Or, I mean, if you, I think if somebody wants to do a sign that's 3%, I think the intent is to let it be acceptable and let the building inspector give them a building permit for it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Right.
and if not, they
At a
can,
certain point, you need to get either a special permit or,
So you could say, wall signs in, exceeding 3%, shall require a special use permit from the planning board.
Well, I like this language better because it sort of indicates that you're not going to go above 5% for a single sign, which is,
So
those
then
pictures
you'd
that-
have to go to a variance.
yeah, if they want to go beyond that, then they're really out.
Beyond 5%?
Beyond, just as you say it, I'm agreeing with what you
Or
have.
5% planning board with a
Right.
special
With a
use,
Special
or
use
5%.
permit Granted by the
Yeah.
planning board.
and then if they want to go to 10%, they
They go to
gotta go to the
ZBA.
ZBA.
include 2 or more offset sections parallel to
Okay.
an
And
area.
I think that's it.
Shall include
So I'll make another two copies, we'll want to look at it the next meeting, and maybe we can schedule a public hearing then,
Yeah.
unless you want to schedule it now.
I'll.
I'm not gonna be here.
But I won't be here, so
Yeah,
it
I won't
doesn't,
be here.
but.
Well, why don't I clean up the language, and at that
Okay.
February meeting, we can set up a public hearing. And make sure that everybody's happy with the language and everything.
Yeah, so make sure to email me, and I'll comment, if I have any comments. on
Okay,
it.
yeah. You can, emails when you're on vacation.
Yes, I do a lot of work.
You're on vacation.
You're not supposed to give spoilers.
All righty. No, I know. Oh, that was good to get that out of the way, keep it moving forward. Committee
Okay.
reports.
One other.
Oh, one other?
Radican.
Radican's
Oh,
letter.
I don't have that on my agenda, yeah.
Yeah, well, it is on mine.
One out of two ain't bad.
And then we can go, okay. So, what's Mr. Radican say? He's suggesting one change to the zoning, which is pretty basic under this purpose section in the second paragraph of his letter. And I don't see why we couldn't just add that to the next iteration of zoning changes that we work on. Get that covered.
Which one are you saying that he wants?
Okay, I'm referring to his January 10th letter,
Okay.
the second paragraph.
Oh, I see, okay.
He just says, I would add the following as a new subsection in section 102I. And it's just one sentence, to advance aesthetic values through design and architecture, because the preservation or enhancement of the visual environment may promote prosperity and the general welfare.
So section 102, is that the section just granting authority to the planning board?
Section 102 is just where it stated that we had the authority to apply
Adopt
zoning.
this.
in the zoning ordinance, what's section 102?
Hang on. I'll verify that.
Zoning, 102, I remember that.
102 is the purpose of zoning.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
we
in the
have,
purpose section.
it's in the purpose,
Yeah.
okay. So we should do that.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, we'll add that to a public hearing in the future.
Okay.
Okay, so, and then he's given us some standards that we might consider for the new village area to have specific architectural design standards. And I guess my question on this is, does the planning board want this in the subdivision site review regulations? So we have the authority to exercise some discretion and judgment without having to go, or the applicants having to go to the zoning board of adjustment anytime they want to change something?
Well, if it's in the site plan regulations
Or subdivision?
or subdivision, then it's not gonna be consistent through the new village, because it's only going to apply to anyone who wants to subdivide, or,
Do a site
or,
plan.
right, so.
But-
If this is, I think if this is really gonna have any teeth, are they looking to do it as an ordinance? Because now it's going to apply to every property owner within that district.
Right.
And I think that's, and get the input from the district, I mean, from that, from obviously the people who will be affected by this. Because easily, there's nothing prohibiting everyone along Beach Street from putting vinyl siding over their stucco. Right, they won't come, there's no reason to come to a planning board for that. And so we can do whatever we want in our subdivision zoning regulations, but is it gonna meet the intent of what this character district is trying to achieve?
No, it's not.
Well, and I guess my thought is if we have specific standards for new village, should we have them for all?
Other areas.
Oh, I agree with
areas?
that,
Why would
too.
you just make it that
And then all of
area?
a sudden, this becomes a major undertaking rather than just,
Yeah, it does.
and I
does.
think,
Yeah, but my point being is, and even if it's throughout all the zones, is it going to apply equally to everyone in the zone, or just the people who haven't developed yet?
No, I think your point is valid, and I think we ought to stay away from it, just for that, either that or have it be an ordinance so it applies to everybody. So if you want to
Equal.
put vinyl siding on your house, you need to get permission to do it in that zone. If I want to go build a new house in that zone, why should I be held to a higher standard than somebody that has a house?
Has houses already
Right.
there.
That's,
a
I
good
think, what
point.
Val's getting
Okay.
at, and I think
Right.
that's a,
it does talk about the planning board reviewing and acting on site plans, so this isn't designed to be zoning.
understood.
No, I understand that, and I don't, that's what I'm saying, where's where's the equity, or, to me, it's a very inequitable thing, and you're not gonna achieve what you're trying to do here, because it's not gonna be consistent through all the properties within the zone.
So what, I think if I'm trying to get my head around this, if I went in and I just knocked down my building, I want to put a new building up, I'm going to have to come and get that approved under this concept, no?
Only if it's in the zoning.
Yeah, okay.
If,
If it's in the zoning.
because
you
unless
will.
you're gonna build over 3 units, you don't come to site plan review.
Okay. So I can do whatever I want under 3 units.
Right.
Yeah, I have a problem with that, I think, on what Val said, that, you're not holding everybody in the neighborhood to the same standard.
Standard, yep.
But also, I also think, if we're gonna look at new villages, there's other areas in this town that
Have
we
historic
should have-
nature.
equally.
Historical.
Historical architecture.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Mhm.
it's, I mean, to me, it just evolves into a much bigger process. I don't think it's right to just say, all right, new village, we're gonna give you these regulations, and nobody else in town
No,
has
I think we'd have to
Right.
those
be,
regulations.
have a neighbor.
I think if you have that neighborhood that comes to the town council with a petition that says, we want our neighborhood to have some kind of zoning to protect our neighborhood, then I think the council can come to us and say, help us develop that. But I think it really has to be driven by that neighborhood.
Right.
I think if we just make the
Something we
first
impose
change-
upon them,
It gives us the ability to look at architecture
Right.
and maybe,
for anybody that comes for site plan or subdivision.
okay.
And we stay out of the overreaching. I think the overreaching, if we want to go there, we can certainly do it, but it's going to take a lot of work by a bunch of people to
Absolutely. And that's
develop.
what has always been
for all the
my
different neighborhoods.
intention about this, and part of the reason I wanted to send that report from Rendell Arndt was to show you the kind of photographs and the documentation that we should have in place if we want to have design review standards that are going to be, that are based on the town of Newmarket, not based on just some general design
Yeah.
principles.
So,
And it's a lot of work. I'm not sure how much it costs, but probably over $100,000 for that study, I would say.
But we have a consensus that
It's a-
we don't want to delve into the the third paragraph here about changing.
What page you want? First page?
First page. I think I'm hearing that we don't want to develop design standards just for New
One
Village.
neighborhood.
Under site
Under
plan or
site plan and
subdivision.
subdivision, right.
Unless they come forward and ask us to protect their neighborhood.
Right.
So if
And-
it
But that's
comes
the
from
same
it-
for any neighborhood.
Right, right.
That's sort of a planned unit development at that point, right? Where you've got the architectural standards built in, wired into the association.
Yeah, but if people in New Village came to us and said, or came to council and said, you know, we want to develop some standards to protect our neighborhood, then the council could come to us and say, can you help us develop standards? That's fine if everybody in the neighborhood, or, you know, the significant majority of them want to do it.
Okay.
I think this is a stretch to try to take that leap at this point, just based on one project.
So, just my question is then, what is it, refresh me, we have some language about 108 specifically, right? And is
That's
that 108 language what we would call design standard, or is something less
That
than?
whole chapter, or that section
Yeah.
of the site review regulations, yes.
It's about
And I think one of the quick fixes, and we talked about it among
Yeah.
our meeting members, is let's just take out the reference to Route
To
108 until we have something that's specific for 108, and just apply it town-wide, so that we are treating everyone the same, and that this is protection of the
Yep.
law.
Well, yeah, I think that would be a good thing to review that in a more formal way, maybe people could look at that section again.
It's, you know, and it would be very simple, just, and Roseanne and I looked at it, just
Yeah, just take that,
eliminating one paragraph.
take that paragraph out
It
and
almost
you're
looked
all
like it
set.
was put in there as an afterthought.
Yeah.
I don't know what the intent was.
That they
but-
just want. And then John also goes on to say in his last paragraph that he imagines we wouldn't want to do design review control over residential development, but for commercial and business zones, you want to give direction to what you want there, and just by changing that line and taking out the 108, we'll accomplish that. So I think that's something we should.
Because, yes, I mean,
Yep.
Would the planning board like me to just draft something, quick?
Yeah.
So that we can discuss at the next meeting that we
Yeah,
have?
absolutely.
And decide whether we want
Yeah.
to go to the hearing or not.
Yeah, because we've been talking about it.
We've been talking about it for
Yeah.
months. I know.
And I think that was a genesis of a lot of the confusion, is that we were specific to 108, but nowhere else in town.
Right.
It was certainly my confusion, no doubt
That's
about
good.
that.
Still working on design regulations.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Any committee reports?
Yep. Town council met, we had a public hearing regarding a community development block grant for housing upgrades to the Great Hill Terrace area. And then along with that, they redid what's it called? The Town Housing and Community Development Plan. So we just updated that because it'd been quite a while since we had done that. So that all passed, and they have their grant. That has no money effect on the town, our town, no taxpayer effect on that. That's above and beyond.
Yeah,
So-
those community development block grants are a good thing.
Is,
A lot of good with
I just want
those.
to say that the Housing and Community Development Plan is something that's specifically required under HUD regulations for CDBG grants, and it's separate from our housing and demographic plan that we have in our master plan. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah,
And I
thank
can
you.
send a copy out to everyone, because it has some good goals
Yeah,
and things
that'd
that I
probably
think
be
we can
good.
all agree to need to be addressed in the community on
Sure.
a townwide basis.
Amy, is the town required or obligated to sustain any type of level of service or anything else by accepting these grants?
Well, I don't think the town is required. I mean, it's kind of, Diane, maybe you can explain it better than I
Yeah.
can, but, because it's
One-
HUD.
Yeah, one of the things is, and the question was it's public housing, well, what if in the future the town decides to sell it? Well, there's a provision in the law governing these HUD grants, it's called the Bonnie Frank Amendment.
Yeah, right.
Which basically says, if you get federal funds for public housing or CDBG or what have you,
Yeah.
you have to maintain that benefit over a certain period, I think it's
Okay.
30 years.
Yeah,
And if you don't, under Bonnie Frank, then you have to replace the housing elsewhere, unit for unit. So in other words, you can't,
Right.
capitalize on federal funds and turn it into a.
right. So if they were to sell the
Change.
piece of land where it is now, and they would have to find another piece of land and then
Right.
replace it.
Exactly.
And that runs from the date that the grant was accepted, so.
Well, it's not just.
Well,
the
it
grant,
renews.
But it would have been.
That was all built with federal
that
grant
was all-
money.
Yeah.
That's for
Right.
In
any-
the 70s.
That
Yeah.
goes back.
So would that timeline start from when it was
No,
built? It
It's
would.
already in
It
effect.
renews.
Okay,
It's already in effect, because they've been a public housing agency for years and years
Okay.
and years, so.
all right.
You know, a lot of that's
Just-
income-driven.
Yeah,
We do a lot of work in some towns where they do a lot of that. They actually repair private residences with HUD money because of the income level.
yeah.
And they build sidewalks and that kind of thing. So that's what, a lot of that's obviously intended for the low-income
Right.
thing. So
Yeah.
I don't think that'd be any kind of issue in town here, because that's been there forever, and there's no intention of
Yeah,
selling it at this
We used to require
point.
liens on properties, though, for housing rehabilitation projects, where if they were sold, before this 30-year period was up,
the town got the
then
money,
the town would have to recoup the funds from,
the
the
sale.
property owner, and.
Yeah.
I think
and
they
it would have
discussed
to be-
something about that
and it
at
would
the
have to
public
be
hearing.
returned to HUD.
How much
Those are
money were they
federal funds.
trying to get?
It was,
I think it's
$500,000.
$500,000. I think that's right.
yeah,
It's a good amount of money. Good.
yeah,
Good.
So it's basically to upgrade the housing.
yeah.
stock.
Yeah.
Mhm.
it's-
Yeah.
It's replacing the so-called modernization grants.
I think it was
that we used to get.
bathrooms is what they're looking at
Bathrooms
doing.
Good.
But mechanical systems.
It was
quite a
bit. It was a lot of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
heating, Really upgrading the
Yeah,
finish is what
quite a
you
bit of,
see.
yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Go ahead.
I was just going to add to that, that we authorized the town administrator to enter into a purchase and sale agreement for land for a new well, the Tucker well. So it's significant to any further development in the town, the addition of a fourth well is important.
Yeah.
Where is that?
Tucker well.
Tucker
And it's
well.
coming
Neil Mill.
in-
Oh, that's
the
finally
planning
coming
board
through?
Coming
Okay.
in next.
Mhm,
at the
yeah.
next meeting. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay, but that was, that happened.
That
It's
happened.
interesting, because when I was on the council, I think we looked at that in the Macintosh, and after the Macintosh, and let the Tucker go, I think, at the time.
There were some
Issues.
issues that needed to be resolved, title issues. I think.
Right, and there was a present, Sean presented on that. The other thing was, I mean, it's at least 4 years or so before that water will come online, from when we own it. And I think the other thing that was interesting about that, he said that, they're right now with Macintosh water being added to Sewell Bennett water, you're blending now. He says that when Tucker well comes online, it will have to be treated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a significant limitation now, because by blending it, that means we can only bring in so much of the Macintosh water. And the Sewell and Bennett wells, especially I think Bennett, really should be shut down for a while, let it recharge. Some of those, and that's an important part of getting that fourth well, is it will give us some ability to rotate the wells, and if something really needs to be left alone, and we can. And Tucker well really is a significant water source. The amount of water is excellent, so.
Absolutely. Anybody have anything else?
I I know several people are going to be out for the February meeting. Gail, you're going to be gone, Valerie's going to be gone, Eric's going to be gone. Anybody else? You're going somewhere too.
This was the end of February meeting that I
Okay.
couldn't make.
So you'll be here for the 14th?
You'll be here for the 14th.
14th
Okay, I
is
just want to make sure.
I might be here for the 14th.
Okay, I just want to make sure we have.
Glenn,
a-
you going to be here for the 14th?
I just looked at it, I'm screwing it around, I'll be here.
Okay, so we do have a quorum, that's what I
Okay.
wanted to make sure.
And
That's
Janice,
just a little-
hopefully.
And Janice, no, Janice is gone too.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and-
They, You're heading to St. Thomas.
If anything comes up in the next couple of weeks for any of you and you can't make it, let Diane know, so we don't have a quorum, we can warn people, a week or two
Or we
in
can do,
advance.
one of yous can do a conference.
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, we can do a conference. Right, good.
Okay.
Good.
Wonderbar.
Anything else?
Yeah,
Diane, anything?
just the
Peter?
only thing,
Go ahead.
Diane and Steve Fournier and I met this morning with Colin and James from Stratford Regional Planning Commission about the upcoming transportation project priorities. It's cycling into the next 10-year transportation plan. So they had a list of projects that would be earmarked in Newmarket. It's basically just covering state and federal roads, which is 108 and 152. So we just kind of quickly went through that list, and I think probably what will just come out of that is just a revised list with some
Updated.
status points as to, what are those project areas and what are the budgeted funds, and then with the idea of what's on the planning horizon. And we talked briefly about at some point, it would be nice to have an update to the transportation chapter of the master plan. So, because we're back into that next 10-year planning cycle. So I thought, what would make sense is, maybe just circulate that list in the next, after we go through this next draft with Stratford Regional Planning, just so that the planning board has an awareness of where are these areas and what are the projects.
Sure.
Because some of them will impact, like we were talking about the industrial park on Forbes Road, on 108, and, is there, we're hearing in the political climate is $1 trillion infrastructure bill coming down the pipeline, so who knows what that means, but, it would make sense to be thinking about.
Not sure New Hampshire's gonna be on that.
All I need is a small piece of that as an engineer.
Diane, is Mike's going to be at the joint meeting?
Yes,
Okay.
I have asked
And is he
to
going to
invite him.
discuss, I found my junkyard thing,
Well,
so,
I assume that on the agenda, and I think we want
Yeah.
to get together to kind of put something together before the meeting, but we'll talk about that letter, the code, the property maintenance code, junkyards.
okay.
Well, obviously, we want to talk about the zoning changes that are in the works, and I don't know if there are other things that board members would like to see on the agenda for
I think we need to
discussion.
talk about the master plan, not the details of it, but the importance of being able to update it as we need to,
You
because
start putting some
it's
funds
crazy when we
aside.
get 10 or 15 years behind the curve.
Yeah,
And I mean,
You know,
it comes down to
takes
money, comes down
Yeah.
to
A lot
money.
of time.
Absolutely.
It's very labor intensive putting those plans together.
Absolutely.
yeah,
A lot of data research.
okay. So we'll plan a little
We'll talk
committee
about the
meeting?
master plan, the transportation chapter,
Okay,
perhaps. Does that sound good?
okay, all right, good.
And then the work we're doing on design review
Right.
and the accessory apartment stuff that's coming in, and I don't know, other things. There was some discussion, people are interested in the concept of smart growth, and wanted to talk about smart growth initiatives. I
Well,
think maybe
actually,
Tony was the one that maybe mentioned that at the council session.
A lot of those are
remember that.
related to railroad. I mean, Massachusetts has a law, allowing special exemptions for development with access to train stations,
That kind of
subways,
thing.
and,
Yeah.
I mean, there's smart growth opportunities in Newmarket, but I'm not so sure they're really economically viable. But it's certainly worth talking about, absolutely.
Yeah, maybe it'd be a good idea to kind of, by the time, as a goal, to try to have a draft agenda items for the next time we meet. Because we'll meet in February, assuming there's a
Okay.
quorum there. Yeah.
Are you going to be at the meeting on, Amy, on the 14th?
Yes.
Okay, well, maybe between the three, well, Eric
Good, that's right.
said fine, yeah, he'd like to join, we could put together a list and
Yeah.
forward that to Steve for consideration by the town council.
If you want
See
to get
what
together
they-
like next week, I can come and meet with you
Okay.
and go through that. Get our, and then we can.
Yeah, we can outreach, we can
Yeah.
do it probably electronically.
Yeah, sure.
Through email.
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be fine.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, great, thank you.
You have anything for us, Diane? Or that was just it?
No. Just been
I think she
very-
gave us enough tonight.
Yeah,
Yes.
you know, it's
She did a lot.
try to keep paperwork.
Keep the ball rolling.
Process rolling
Moving
here.
forward.
And,
I
oh,
will-
yes, there was one thing. I wanted to get together with Rosie Valerie and Dale before you all head out on your vacation so that we can have another work session on
Sure.
the work on the CCRC and the assisted living housing.
Yep.
Assisted housing alternative.
Are you thinking next week or something?
Sometime next week.
Okay,
So I'll email you about that. Okay, that's all.
very good. I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you all.
Thank you.
You. Gotta go home, watch out, I think I'll leave.